title of my talk today is Dark Clouds. It's been an unusually eventful week. A lot has happened in the world, not just in the United States of America, but throughout the world. It started with a bomb blast in Baghdad, or maybe before that. Maybe there was something I'm missing here.
Bangladesh.
What?
There's a bomb blast in Bangladesh.
Yeah, it started actually with the bomb blast in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. Then after that, then there was another one, and then another one, and in Saudi Arabia it occurred, and it's just, it's an amazing time that we live in when we see all of these things, and it's not unusual that most people on the planet right now are concerned. They're concerned about the leadership that we have. They're concerned about what the leadership is doing to counteract or to stop some of the violence that's being carried out. The reason I mentioned the one in that really got me, the one in Baghdad, is because I remember seeing the first headline: 90 people killed, 200 and something injured. And then later in the day, 107 killed, and it just kept going up and up. The death toll just kept going up, and I'm thinking, oh my, such a world where human life is not considered very valuable. That some sort of ideal, some sort of twisted ideal becomes more valuable and more precious to some than even their own lives, that they will do some of these atrocious acts that have occurred. It's really easy to get caught up in that to the point that that's all we think about and that's all we react to. Here's the really difficult part about that. If it happens enough and we react to it long enough, after a while we become numb to it. And we just go, yeah. The other bomb went off, oh yeah, more people died, yeah. And we become numb to the whole case that is going on in the world. A case, I call it a case because it's a illness. It is a mental sickness. It is a spiritual, twisted idea that says that life itself is not as valuable as something, a cause. That's not the way that we have been taught to view life. That's not the way that we, and I'm speaking we in a worldly sense, not simply in a United States sense. It's not what our master teacher taught. He did not teach violence. He did not teach that the way to achieve an end is at any means. Rather, he taught forgiveness. He taught that if someone asks you to carry their load for a mile, carry it 2, carry it more. He taught us a way to shift our consciousness from vengeance to love, even to those who appear to be our enemies. You know, in the Sermon on the Mount, one of the things that he was teaching more than anything else was that you have been told, and then he would give some scripture from Hebrew scripture. The one that occurs to me in this instance is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, forgive those who have harmed you. Forgive those who would harm you. Forgive in advance. Develop a consciousness of full forgiveness to everyone. Now, does this somehow take away or dissolve the dark clouds that exist in our world? No, it doesn't. When asked what would the end times be like, Jesus, in almost a joking way, in almost an ironic way, said, well, in the end times there will be wars and rumors of wars, and there will be earthquakes, and there will be cataclysms and storms, knowing full well in his mind that these things are occurring now and always will. Because as long as there's mixed consciousness in the world, these things will happen. Now, one of the great fears that people have is that peace will reign everywhere. The great fear they have is that they will lose their sense of separation. They will lose their personal, egoistic identity. They're not aware that that's what's driving them, but that's really what's happening. Right there, this idea that somehow, if I allow myself to become one with the one, I'm gone, and there is no me anymore. When they don't realize that this melding with the one causes each one of us not to be dissipated, but to be lifted up, to become emancipated, to be freed from this sense of separation. To look out at someone and fear them because of the color of their skin or because of their belief system, to look out and see this requires that we must see them as an other and our self as a separate part. That's where the fear comes when somebody says, now, officer, I just want to tell you, I'm carrying a gun. And his immediate reaction to that is fear, resistance. It's difficult. It takes a certain amount of training and a certain amount of love to be able to say to that person, well, if that's the case, then why don't you just step out of the car for a moment and let's diffuse this situation, rather than acting on the edge of it and being afraid and acting on that. He's got a gun, he's got a gun. Where's the gun? It's in his pocket, deep in his pocket. He couldn't possibly get to it. When we see these kind of things occurring, when we see policemen, innocent policemen, observing in a city far away from anything where any of these acts have occurred, in a city far away, and we see them dropping. 1, 2, 3, a couple of wounded, a couple of more wounded, 4, 5. Panic like that, being set off. You see an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The clouds, the dark clouds that are looming upon our society and our way of life come from the dark clouds in our consciousness. Here's the saving grace of all that. In weather, we know that dark clouds can portend two things. Storms, ravage, can possibly be something damaged, blown away. But it can also bring rain. You know, I've always thought about this too. You know, Jesus states, God causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Now, think about that a moment. God is loving all of them, and the rain is bringing about healing. The rain is bringing about a chance for growth again. But this rain also can bring floods. It can bring damage. And so, in this one statement, you see both sides of one coin. God causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Those that deserve get what they deserve because of what they carry in consciousness. The dark clouds in our minds can overwhelm us to the point that we see nothing out in the outer except storms. Storms bringing devastation and destruction. And that builds up within our consciousness until we start drawing to ourselves situations just like that. Or we can see these storms as bringing to us healing rain, cleansing. Cleansing once again. We can say, yes, this has occurred, but I forgive. I allow love to express from me as me into a world that is hurting. Hurting, looking for an answer. Answer at all times. You know, the wonderful thing about clouds is that even though they make us feel that darkness is upon us, and that the thicker the cloud, the darker the sky, and the sense of seems like it's going to be that way forever, we know that this too shall pass. We also know that regardless of how thick and how widespread the clouds may be in our minds or in our consciousness, that there is a sun shining above it all. That's just goes without saying, doesn't it? Regardless of how thick the clouds may be, the light is still shining. Shining above it. Simply waiting for it to pass. Now we have control over how long it stays in place and what the outcome is. In our consciousness, we have this ability. We have it. It's not brought to us from the outside. We're not waiting for a wind to blow it away. We're not waiting for another day. Now, right now is the time that we can change this in consciousness. We don't have to accept the world as it is and say, well, that's just the way it has always been and that's the way it'll always be. We can change it now in our consciousness. There are dark clouds rolling. We see it in the outer and we can't deny it. We can't say it isn't happening because we see it happening. Some people are feeling it in a very, very, very personal way, feeling it happen. But we can be the instrument which helps to dissolve and dissipate the clouds in our mind and the clouds in our world. You know, it's very easy to turn everything that's happening in the world right now into a political argument. To try to find somebody that's to blame. My goodness, I saw an article, I'm sure many of you did too, where somebody was blaming what happened in Dallas on Hillary Clinton. Boy, what a stretch. What a stretch. To blame it on anyone is such a stretch of the imagination. This happened from one individual. All of these things always happen from one individual. You know, many of you can remember there was a time when a man sat up in a tower in a school in Texas, picked people off. It was in the 1960s. A lot more, and as I recall, it was in the 50s. 50 people or so were gunned down by this person before they finally stopped them. These things happen and will continue to happen just as Jesus was trying to point out. There will always be wars and rumors of wars. There will always be earthquakes. There will always be devastation occurring in the outer, but it does not have to have anything to do with what's happening in the inner. That we have control over. That we can bring peace to. That we can dissolve the clouds that exist in our own minds, the dark clouds which seem to be overtaking us, and we can get to the point where the sun, the light, can shine once again. It's never stopped shining, never will. It's there. It's only when we feel this sense of separation that we feel so alone and so helpless, so insecure. So once again, return to the oneness, being at one with the one, being at one with all that is. When we return to that place, then nothing can overcome that. Nothing at all. You know, I love that unity says that evil is an attempt by human minds to negate divine will. And what is that will? Good. All good. Not a good that's measured against some other evil, but just good. Good, everywhere present. We can be that and we can be there. We can change this world one consciousness at a time, one awareness at a time, one loving heart at a time, when we become that consciousness, that awareness, that loving heart. Let us do that. When we do that, then we too can bring peace to the world. For wherever we are, God is. God is always present, never leaves us, never ever is separate from us. It's only in our imagination that this occurs. Let's leave this imagined world and enter into the true world once again, where everyone is loved and everyone is valued.